Hello and welcome. You are listening to the Investor Lab, the auditory epicenter for passionate people seeking a life of freedom, choice, and abundance. And on today's show, you are absolutely going to be tapping into a pathway to freedom, choice, and abundance. I had a chat with Dr. Simone Boer, who is a Dashdot client, but is also a neuroscientist, a PhD neuroscientist, psychologist, brain hacker. She is the coach with the rainbow hair and so much more. Not only that, she's an extremely successful property investor. So over a 13-year period from 2008, she managed to build a property portfolio that ultimately delivered her to a state of financial freedom. But now she's pivoted her approach to be able to get financial freedom for her partner as well. She's on that second stage. What we dig into today is a little bit about the property journey, but we also really dig into, from a scientific level, how to hack your brain to achieve greater levels of freedom, choice, and abundance, and how you can apply that in your day-to-day life as well. So if you're interested in shaping your mindset in a way that is rooted in science, not woo, that is going to help you to achieve that life of freedom, choice, and abundance, then this is absolutely the episode for you. I honestly could have spoken with Simone for hours. It was a great conversation, and it was really hitting on two of my favorite topics, which is how to use property to build wealth, but then also how to change your mindset to be able to achieve the life that you want and live a life by design and not by default. So I can't wait for you to get into this. My only request is that you share this episode with somebody else. We don't do advertising on this show. We don't do anything like that. All we do is we want to serve you, to help you to live a better life and to create a life of freedom, choice, and abundance. That's what it's all about. And if you want to help somebody else to do that too, all you need to do is share this episode with them, or a snippet of this, or anything that you like, because that would help us to help more people just like you. So without any further ado, let's get stuck right into it. And I will see you on the inside. Hey guys, welcome back to the Investor Lab. I am joined today by a super special guest, Dr. Simone Boer, the coach with the rainbow hair. Simone, how are you today?
I'm really well, thank you, Goose. How are you today?
I am effervescent. I am absolutely, I'm a little bit spritzy. I've got a bit of a schwitz going on. So yeah, no, life's great.
What's made you have your little bit of spritzy going on?
Sun's shining, life's good. You just before we jumped on to start recording this podcast, I asked how you were. You basically said something along the lines of, you know, living your best life, a life that you've designed, and all of that. I'm the same. I'm like, this is all, yeah. I wake up every day grateful for the life that I get to live and get to experience, and it is all life I design. I'm super excited to kind of dig into that with you as well. So, enough about me. Let's talk about you. I'd love to know, and for the benefit of the listener, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? You said you're the coach with the rainbow hair. What's your story?
Yeah, not a problem. So you'll notice that there's a doctor in front of my name, and that's from a PhD in neuroscience. And I've done 10 years of study of psychology and neuroscience, and decided that wasn't for me. Went into a bit of a data analytics career, ended up in strategy, engagement, basically created the engagement to talk to 16,000 people in a region that resulted in a community vision, 180,000 data points, 162 plus workshops. I know you like stats, Goose.
Yeah.
And that community vision basically is a 30-year vision that has regenerated and catalyzed the regeneration of a region. And then what do you do after that? Well, I went into an operational role, managing pools and gyms, decided I've had enough of corporate life and reworked myself, started out my own business. And really, I combined all of my career, and I use brain hacks to get you unstuck.
That is fascinating. That is fascinating. So can I ask, what was like, going back to the community vision? So I want to kind of like, I'm interested. Can we dig in there a little bit? So
absolutely.
Tell me a little bit about that. So what was the thesis? And then you had to basically run a series of assessments to get the data points, right? So then you could use those data points to inform what the future plan would be. kind of?
Absolutely, 100%. So I was given the project to run, which was to create a 30-year long-term community vision. And what was happening in the region was a lot of manufacturing was shut. The narrative around the region was very negative. And we also had a lot of stakeholders at odds with each other, basically pitching their own view of what it would look like. So it was given to me to try to bring everything together, to talk to the community, and this is grassroots community, and get them all on board with why a 30-year vision is important. And so during the course of 10 months, I designed a series of workshops, outings, face-to-face with the community. I went and met the community. So I went to the far edges of the region. There's townships, the settlements in town where people were shopping everywhere over 10 months, and collected 180,000 data points, which was all qualitative words. Went into the data analytics.
Unstructured data, we call that, right?
Absolutely unstructured data. And they did this, crazy little technique called topic analysis to actually pull out the key themes of what the community wanted.
Awesome.
Why they lived where they lived, what they wanted to see within their region. And then this all culminated in basically a community deliberative debate over 4 scenarios of what they wanted the region to be, I guess, internationally known and recognised as. And, a whole heap of little voting mechanisms as they debated. And they ended up saying that they wanted the region to be known as a clever and creative region. And then within 6 months of that vision being endorsed, UNESCO lands and says, we're going to designate you as a city of design. So it was
Hang on a sec. That almost sounds like manifestation. Like that sounds like collective manifestation, right? If you can congeal and coagulate the collective mind of a region, and then like bang, it's like, that's awesome. What did that do for the sentiment of the local community? Like, how did that change the region and you've got a neuroscience and psychology background. So how did that change the psychology of the area? Because you said at the start, like, things were shutting down and blah, blah, blah. And, there's probably a negative sentiment about the area. How did things shift?
Upwards, absolutely upwards. There was a spark. Now, how you can tell that there's a spark was in local media. And how the local media started to talk about the region. No one had ever heard of clever or creative, or it wasn't even part of the narrative. But by having the words clever and creative, it speaks to the heart of people. And so the local media picked it up. The advocacy groups picked it up. Local business picked it up. Local business even formed their own strategies around this vision as well. So it just started to become narrative, and is common narrative within the region, and is used from an advocacy piece for essentially funding federal, state into the region now.
That's really fascinating for a couple of things. Number one, the power of a vision, right? So the power of a vision is huge, right? So if you've got a vision that is strong enough that people can believe in, even people that you weren't directly interacting with, i.e. the business groups, would then going, oh, yep, that's our vision too, and then creating their own strategies around that. The other thing that's really interesting that you said there is that the sentiment then permeated into the media, and said then what happens is you end up with the self-reinforcing loop. It's a positive feedback loop, because then the media are saying good things, then people are believing good things and then reading good things. And we actually, just as a little kind of side note, because you're obviously into data as well, we've actually been building algorithms, machine learning and all of that kind of stuff to do sentiment analysis specifically on media of regions. So we can track the change. We can track the sentiment in a region, and also how it's changing over time as an indicator of what that can do for the property market. So that's really interesting. That's fascinating.
Well, we need to talk about this later, Goose, because absolutely, I was definitely looking at the sentiment analysis afterwards through various other tools as well of the region, and it definitely had kicked up as well following the creation of the vision, and all that negative sentiment had definitely turned upwards to where it is today.
Totally. And you know what's really interesting about that is that the single thing that drives property market, obviously I'm coming at it from like a property angle, right? The single thing that drives property markets more than anything else is psychographics. It's the way people think and feel about an area. So people talk about things like, oh, it's infrastructure, or it's this, or it's that, or it's the other thing. It's actually about how people perceive the area. Because if you look at places like Bondi and Vaucluse, the prices keep going up, but I haven't seen a single new infrastructure project or major jobs initiative happening around here, So it's about what people perceive. And so then perception shapes reality, right? Because and this is true for every single individual, right? So like there is no absolute reality. It is all about the perception. And if the perception is positive, and that's how you get markets that move and do all of this kind of stuff, is people like, oh my God, this is great. I'm going to go there and I'm going to move there or buy there and invest there or whatever the case may be. But the perception of the individual shapes the actual outcome of the world, just in the same way that when that community collectively co-created and had a shared vision about being creative and clever and all that kind of stuff, boom, UNESCO in there. Awesome.
Absolutely.
That's super exciting. That's great. So we're on a really good topic here because we're talking about psychology, brain hacks, and also property. So where do you want to go next? I'm interested to know about some of your brain hacks, but I'm also interested to know about like what's your interest in property. Where do you want to go next?
Oh wow. I live a portfolio career. One of it is brain hacks and one of it is property, and this is just great because I get to merge the two together in this discussion. So this is like
this is the same for me. It's the same for me. It's like I just love playing in that space. Okay, cool. All right, let's actually start with property, and then we're going to come back to brain hacks. So when did you start getting interested in property investing?
Back in 2008, my partner and I at the time were looking for our first house to buy. And I'd been interested in property, knew that property was a vehicle in order to create wealth of sorts. So we went out in our local area looking for a property to buy. And we found a 3-bedroom. Do you mind me asking what the local area was at the time? Absolutely. It was in Geelong or Lara. I'm in Lara. And we were looking at a 3-bedroom townhouse that was, 5 years old. And then we came across a property that was a 12-square little house on a 650 square metre block. And I said straight away, there's more value in the land than the little townhouse. And so we essentially purchased that, lived in it, renovated it, and decided we'd go out and subdivide because that's what you can do. Yeah. So I looked at the driveway and went, I think I can put a house on the back there.
Awesome.
Searched all the builders around in the area, found one that was willing to work with us and to basically manage the subdivision process, build. And we did that. And we went, well, that's quite easy. We basically got a piece of land or a house for free. Let's go and replicate that model over and over again.
Wow, that's awesome. And then what happened from there? What, you just going like we don't need to go every. I'm interested though. Like you said, you went and do it again. You went and just started doing it again. How many times did you do that? Did you start to try and work out how to invest outside your own backyard? How did that work? So what happened then? We then purchased another property because we thought, well, 2 lots is easy. Let's go for 3. Yeah.
A lot more difficult to do a 3-lot subdivision than a 2-lot subdivision.
Why?
So, there's a lot more council fees. We ended up having to do a sewer main extension. We had to put in some additional sewer outlets and drainage outlets, and it was just a lot more difficult. Because we thought we knew what we were doing, we'd already done one successfully. Building market had changed and had increased their prices. So we thought, well, we can do it all ourselves. We can manage it ourselves. We know what we're doing. And whereas it was 18 months for the first piece of work we did, the second piece of work took about 4 years for us to do. And we ended up selling off one of the pieces of land in order to afford building the second lot onto that 3-lot subdivision. And we went, we've got some really good learnings there. That's a long time. So we then did it again. But this time we just did two-lot subdivision and found a builder who was willing to oversee the subdivision process again. So we basically did this cookie cutter approach, and then along the way we did a few house purchases, renos in that, and ended up for about 4 or 5 years having 7 investment properties. High capital increase because the value we had created was through the subdivisions and the actual build. So we got to basically 2021. Start of 2021, we kept everything throughout the pandemic or the start of the pandemic. And we went, let's start selling a few off, because what's happened in the region is that the property prices had increased quite substantially. And through that, we paid off the house that we're currently in. And I just went, you know what? I don't necessarily have to work now.
It's awesome.
And I went, I can actually retire and just live off basically by that stage we had our principal place of residence paid off, and 4 properties that were bringing in a reasonable rental. And what was really interesting at that time, Goose, was in between when I said I'm finishing work, and in between when I finish work, I'm going to do a little bit of cosmetic renos to sell off 2 of our properties. So we end up down to 4 at that stage. The property market had moved and it had increased in that time. And this is this wonderful Goldilocks zone that you talk about. And we had literally made 80 to 100K on the 2 properties we were planning to sell outright.
Awesome.
In that time. And so what my partner said as I was retiring, I want you to now focus on maximizing what we're doing with properties.
Awesome. Loving it. Love it. That's pretty, so 2008 to 2021, and you basically hit financial freedom in 2021, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. So that's 13 years.
Yes.
That's not bad going. Now, I'd like to pick up on something else, right? In 2008, that was the start of the GFC.
Yes.
So that was a time when people were saying, oh my God, the world's ending. And that was when you were just getting started. Talk to me about your mindset during that period of time. Why is it that you were one of the ones that said, no, now's the time to go, when a lot of other people were saying, no, now's the time to stop?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because I was in laboratory science at that time, and the funding, we got 40% of our funding cut. And that was the US funding for the laboratory. So literally the world was ending in ways. And that was when I first made my first pivot of my career at that time as well. And for me, it was about us buying our PPR. So it was about us buying something because we were ready and we were financially ready to carry anything that came our way from the GFC. Just from a property sense, in living in our own home. But we thought we can make something out of this at the same time. And that's kind of how we went, which was to create the value through the renovation and then to create the additional value or the income stream through the subdivision.
Yeah, got it. Do you remember what the interest rates were when you started?
Yeah, it was about 8.9% at the time.
So what is your view on interest rates now?
Well, they are ridiculous now. They are too low. I've never seen anything like it. So I know that we talk about in terms of a 3% interest rate or or cash rate, but we have been able to carry the 8.9% as well. So I don't think it will go up as high as that, but
even if it did, because property prices, you got to remember, were going up pretty highly around that time. So that's pretty interesting. So so your strategy from 2008 to 2021 was to buy manufacturer equity, buy manufacturer equity, buy manufacturer equity. What were the kind of yields you were getting? Were they self-sustaining? Were they negatively geared? What was the kind of, where did they land?
Well, because we created the value from the capital, They were all self-sustaining. So the yields we were getting, or the yields that we're currently getting now, sits between the 3.7 to the 4.1%. The two that we sold off last year were at 3.4 and 3.8% of current market. And actually, there's another interesting story too. My partner and I went out like Easter last year, just as I was finishing up. We went out to buy socks, and we came back with 3 house and land packages.
How'd that happen?
So I'd been researching the various areas for a little bit of time. And I said, let's just go out whilst we bought our socks, and let's just go out and check out some property, because we were getting itchy feet almost. We'd done our work. We, set ourselves up. And so we went to the house and land package office, and I'd already done all the sums. I said, okay, well, we'll do 1. And my partner goes, let's do 3. If the sums if the numbers make sense, let's just do 3. So we've literally gone and done 3.
Nice. And how did they pan out? Did they end up being good?
So they have gone up basically 35% in growth.
Nice.
Since
in how long?
We're sitting in about 14 months now. The land itself hasn't titled yet. The land will title towards the end of the year, but we've made 35% on each of those in between now, and all we've got is a deposit sitting on them for the last year.
That's awesome. That's so good. That is so good. And so how then has, so a couple of things, right? So you, in 13 years, from 2008 to 2001, the thesis or the strategy was to manufacture equity. And then, if I'm hearing you correctly, you use that equity to be able to manage your LVRs such that the cash flow would be able to self-support the assets, so you weren't in a cash flow negative position.
Absolutely, 100%. That was our investment strategy at the time.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so relatively low debt per property, so to make sure your expenses weren't too high, and you would be able to do that by the equity that you've been creating to manage your LVRs. Cool. Yep. All right, awesome. That's perfect. That's great. Then you've hit financial freedom effectively in 2021. When did you've got your own business, right?
Yes.
When did you start your business?
I started my business in August just last year. So I've only been going for about 8 or 9 months now.
Yeah. So after you hit that kind of point, so you managed to quit the job, right? I'm financially free, and now you get to do what you want, right?
Correct.
How good. And so obviously we've bought a couple of properties together. You've been working with Dash. So I'm interested to know, how has your investment strategy changed, right?
Yes.
And talk to me about your experience working with Dash, the kind of properties you got there.
Absolutely. So what has happened since our time, since what I call it lucky in some ways, whereby we were very fortunate to see this gap in the market around subdivisions back in 2008 to 2016, 17. Yeah. And what had happened is that the market had gotten a bit more savvier, and we had found that our previous, strategy around creating that equity wasn't as easy to create through subdivisions, because essentially the properties that were coming on the market at the subdividable selling
all the value
price.
was being priced in, right? All the value was being priced in.
Absolutely. The value was priced in from that perspective. So I went, well, why would you subdivide? So we had to change the way that we worked, which is part of the reason why we went for the house and land packages to create that equity. And then I went, I've got time on my hands. I'm retired now. Let's start looking interstate. And I had a mate of mine who said, you can get a lot more looking interstate. So I literally started to research, because I've got all the data background. I went, I can do this, not a problem. At the same time, I saw one of those fabulous little ads that you have, Goose, on Facebook. I listened to it. I went, that is exactly what our investment strategy has been to date. But you just really named it in such a way that I went, well, I already aligned to that. But I went, you know what, I can do this myself. I know a bit about property.
Yep.
So I spent about 2 months researching the interstate market, the different areas. But because I'd already seen what had happened based on all of our properties and seen this beautiful Goldilocks zone that happens every few years, based on what we had experienced and literally had experienced in 2021 as well, knowing that the price of a property can increase, anywhere from 5 to 15% in basically a couple of months or even more.
Yeah.
I went, how on earth can I find those indicators right at that beautiful sweet spot?
Yeah.
And so I went, and after a couple of months of me researching, going, I think I can do this all myself. The other thing is as well that really interested me about Dashdot was that you had the connections to all the regions. So over this period of 10 years of investing, we had built a hugely strong network of who was good to work with and who wasn't, but that was in our local region.
Yeah.
And so for me, I sat there and went, okay, stop being so pig-headed, Simone. Go and just sign up with these guys and see what will happen. So literally I signed up with 2 properties to purchase, and what can I say? Of course, I asked about the data. I needed to see what this magical, 122 indicators or however many you're up to now around the region, because I was sitting there going, I need to see all this. Yeah. My partner was also very skeptical as well, because we have had some experience in all of this.
Of course, yeah.
And so we got into a bit of the back end to actually just look at some of the regions, and I went, okay, this is all checking out. What you're saying is actually checking out. And so we went, well, what have we got to lose? So we purchased our first property in Townsville, August 2021. And in between that to now, it has gone up 4% in terms of the house increase in price. Growth, yep. And we've ended up with something like a 9.4% yield.
I actually have a recent valuation on that property, and it's actually gone up a little bit more than 4%. It's actually gone up 9.9% in that amount of time. Yeah, so it's had 9.9% capital growth. We got a valuation done last month. If you haven't received that, by the sound of it, I'm going to make sure we get that sent to you straight after this, because you should have that too. But that's actually gone up. Yeah, it's grown 9.9% in the last 7 months on a 9.5% gross yield.
Yeah. So the property that I swapped out that I'd sold was only doing a yield of 3.4%. So we sat there and looked at that and I went, the numbers stack up. This is amazing. What are you guys going to give us next?
And then
we had a few false starts for the next property because literally the areas that we were looking at had just we're moving. The markets are moving incredibly quickly, and we basically missed out on those properties. And that was one of the really fantastic philosophies of Dashdot, which is we don't pay over market, so we pay below market rate or market rate. So that once again gave me additional confidence in Dashdot. Yeah. So it took a few false starts, but I didn't care because I wasn't doing the work. You guys were doing the work for me. And then we ended up purchasing in Western Australia. And what was just amazing, we purchased the property for $350,000 at the time, and ended up between contract and settlement basically making $60,000 on the sell price in that time. So we're looking at that going, you've just come in at that beautiful sweet spot. And then the yield, I think we're getting a 6.8% yield or something like that on that property through a company contract. And this is the first time I'd ever embarked on a company contract. And I went, this is amazing. So literally looking at the rest of our properties that we have at the moment, who are, I guess, we've got a high capital we've made on them. We've looked at the numbers. We've gone, we're going to sell some of these and convert them straight into what you guys are doing.
That's awesome. That is so good. That's fantastic. Yeah, because looking at the one in that you bought in WA, which you bought in Eton in WA, which I personally love. We bought one in there, bought a property in the suburb right next door in Australand. That's grown by 16.3% in there just in that time since you bought it, which is awesome. That's That's great, right? And what I love about this is you've already had success, and now you've actually found a different way to achieve even bigger goals. So, what are your goals now? Like you're kind of like past that hurdle that most people aim for, and now you're able to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, all of the good stuff. So now, like on the property front, but also the personal front, life goals. Like what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah. So whilst I've been able to do that for myself, my partner still has to work for the man.
Got it.
So the aim is to get us completely financially free so that he can also do the same as me. Awesome. And create that freedom that I now have. So that's first and foremost. And that, we believe, is through property to enable 100%. To enable us to do that. And it's really having that mindset to go, we can do it. And so from our goals perspective, absolutely that. But then it's really, we can then choose to live the life that we want to, which of course, most people, as you say, freedom, choice, and abundance, or as I say, live your best life.
Yeah, what's really interesting about your approach, right? And it's an approach generally that I actually really advocate, because I have a lot of people asking me, and for example, I've met with some clients recently who have managed to buy anywhere between 4 and 6 properties in sort of 18 months working with this. And then they're sort of going, oh, wow, hang on a second. What do I do now? Like, and it's basically like, just keep doing that, because you effectively scaled your portfolio up to 7 properties, right? So you built a huge capital base, right? And now you're able to convert that capital base into more cash flow. And you can do that by buying properties with good yields, and also by managing the debt levels on those properties to maximize the cash flow you're getting from it. So then you've got a pure income replacement play. And I had one of our clients recently who's he's bought 5 properties in just under 18 months. And his goal was, a certain cash flow goal so that he could, kick back and do nothing. And I said, well, if you literally just like double that, if we just do that again, right, and then do nothing for a couple of years, then you're going to have that, will have achieved that kind of critical mass to now be able to convert that into cash flow. So I think the approach that you've done there, scale, consolidate, right, reinvest, reap the rewards. I reckon you both got to be able to kick back anytime soon. I think it's going to be awesome.
That's absolutely the aim. And literally, you have to change and what we've learned through this process is you have to change your investment strategy. Firstly, for where you are in life, and secondly, what the market conditions are as well. So as much as we were about creating the capital, and then that capital will reduce our LVR and all of that and keep the small loans, that wasn't possible in the market that we were looking at. So we went, well, what does a different investment strategy look like? And before we invested with Dashdot, I had been researching for probably about 6 months in total. And what we found from Dashdot was that you created a new investment pathway and strategy that I couldn't necessarily do all by myself, even though I was so experienced in this property investment game.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well because, as you mentioned, you've got some properties which are ostensibly great performing properties, but they're still, they're in the 3s in terms of yields and stuff like that. And realistically, to create what you want, you're gonna you can do way better. You could double the amount of cash flow you get out of the properties just by buying something else. Triple, yeah, exactly, triple, right? So you're in the 9s, right? So it makes a massive difference. I want to start asking about some of the brain hack stuff, but just quickly before I do, is there any advice you would give to someone because you're an experienced investor who's then come and work with us? If you've got any advice to someone who's thinking about getting started, but maybe is a little bit like, I'm not really sure, is this the kind of thing I should do? What do you think?
Absolutely. So first of all, you have to think you can do it. And this comes back to part of that mindset that you have to want it. So you have to know what it is that you want and why you're doing it. And we had always done it to to enable a better life for ourselves. So that was part of the reason why. So it's about having the mindset that it's doable, it's achievable, and it's achievable at whatever stage within your life. And then secondly, get the help. Now, we were lucky at the start that we found a builder who was willing to oversee the subdivision process for us. And once we worked that out through trial and error, we found another builder willing to do it on our third time round. So in terms of thinking about it now, it's about getting that help. And I guess in terms of customer experience from Dashdot, wow, you guys have blown me away. To purchase interstate has been some of the most easiest buys I've ever had, because you guys just package it just so beautifully with all of the data, all of the insights, all of the projections of where it is now, where you think it can be. And those two properties we've purchased have outperformed all of those projections. And what you do project is actually quite conservative.
Yeah. We try and be conservative in the projections, because if it works on a conservative basis, then good, Absolutely.
So from my perspective is buy in the assistance. So you can either trial and error on your own, and you may hit it well, or you may not, or you buy in that expertise to expedite where you want to go, as long as you know where you want to go and why you want to get there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I would just say as well that it's almost too easy, because I've actually gone through the process now as a client. Like, we bought a couple of properties. I'm like, yeah, great. Well, let's do the whole thing. I've to the degree that I've almost forgotten that we're even buying properties. And I'm like, oh, hang on a second, what's going on over here? You sort of, anyway. So let's talk about brain hacks, right? So when you say brain hacks, what do you mean?
Yes. Okay, so we take a step back from this. Okay,
yeah.
And what I want to say is that our brains are incredibly lazy. They are lazy, lazy beings. And part of the reason for it is that for every single decision we make, we use glucose. And it doesn't matter whether it's a small decision or a big decision, we will still use the same amount of glucose in every single decision. So what happens is that our brain tries to avoid decision making, which is really where habits come into place. So what happens in this, before I get to the brain hacks, is we may think that we consciously make decisions throughout our life. However, something like 95 to 98% of our decisions is actually made subconsciously and unconsciously. So how we actually make those decisions is based on how we subconsciously and unconsciously view the world. And what is amazing is researchers have found over 188 shortcuts that our brain makes around how we view the world. So a brain hack is essentially a technique or activity or insight that breaks any one of those 188 shortcuts that our brain has made around how we view the world and how we make decisions subconsciously and unconsciously.
This is so good. I absolutely love this stuff, because what you're effectively saying is that the brain is a platform, right? Yep. And most of the decisions we make, 95 to 98% of the decisions we make are subconscious, purely based on our pre-programmed worldview, right? Yes. Whatever that may be. And that could be that my pre-programmed worldview is that everyone's out to get me, right? Yep. And my pre-programmed worldview is that I will never be successful, or my pre-programmed worldview is that money is evil, right? Or any of these things, right? So you have all these kind of, or my pre-programmed worldview is that I must support a certain football team or whatever, right? So you make all these kind of, this is all in there and they're grooves, and because of that, like those grooves get put in there like a record, and you just keep playing those, and it's like decisions get made based on that pre-recorded loop of like, this is my worldview, this is my worldview. Great. So tell me about give me an example of, I'm pretty sure I understand that some of the hacks, but tell me some of the hacks that you can do to start to reprogram that worldview.
So one of them is just a simple question, and it's the right question at the right time when you're ready to listen to it. So one of those pre-programs you could have could be, I need to work for my money. Right? And a really simple question is, you can ask yourself, is that true?
I love it. I love it.
And that's one of my favorite questions that I ask. So anytime that I think I'm running one of those pre-programs, I ask myself, is that true?
Yeah.
And it's enough to break that and start to create, I guess, a dissonance in your mind to go, maybe, maybe not. And then obviously you go down going, where did that come from? And often all of these pre-programs get formed between the ages of 0 and 7 years old.
Yeah.
When we're young. So that's an example of one. Another one whereby you can actually tap into what you're unconsciously thinking is a simple visualization technique. And that's just a guided meditation, which basically drops your brainwaves and opens up the door to your subconscious. And your subconscious can only speak to us really in visuals, doesn't speak to us in words.
Yeah.
So a visualization technique can actually get to the root of a lot of your decision making for you to then question it.
Yeah, that's really interesting, right? Because people don't think about that. They think about their brain as being or their thoughts as kind of being structured, kind of almost textual. But then if you actually think about it, right? If you actually really pay attention, none of the thoughts you have are words. All of the thoughts that you have are internal visualizations or feelings.
Yes.
And it's quite funny because sometimes I'll talk to Gabby, or she'll talk to me and she'll ask me something, because I'm quite a visual thinker. She laughs because my whole face shuts down. It's almost like a robot and someone's just turned off the power. I'll be like, and I'll just be like, just staring into the abyss. Because in my mind, it's like this whole tapestry of things going on. Then I'll be like, right, I'm back. And then I'll explain. So it's really funny. So how can you talk to me about the visualizations? How can you shift that?
Well, so it depends on what you're focusing on. So one of the visualizations I made up last week was around trying to understand your mask and what mask you're presenting to the world. And literally in that visualization, it was imagine yourself at your very best, what you look like, and then take that mask off. And the visualization that comes out of that is actually more so your true inner self.
Interesting.
Or another visualization I have is work out what it is that's holding you stuck or making you stuck, and then visualize whatever comes up to whatever time point or experience that was the cause of that stuckness. And when you look at that in a meditation perspective, you start to visualize things that you may not have noticed, to create once again that dissonance of, hang on, what I viewed or my perception of, that event that eventually made me stuck may or may not be true. And as soon as you have a bit of that in your mind, it starts to change really subconsciously, therefore consciously, your decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you familiar with the work of Byron Katie?
No.
Okay, so Byron Katie, you definitely got to check out her stuff. She's got a book called The Work, or a process which she calls The Work, and I think that you'd be into it, right? And it's basically 4 questions, only 4 questions. And the questions are, number 1, is it true?
Yes.
The second question is, can you absolutely know that it is true? Right? Can you absolutely know that it is true? Right? And check yourself there. The third question is, how do you react when you believe that thought?
Yes.
And the fourth question is, who would you be without the thought?
Oh.
Boom, right? And if you anytime that you need to go through a reprogramming, it's like, all right, I believe that this person's trying to, they're bloody trying to do something, or I've got to. It's like, well, is it true? And how could you know that it is true? And how do you react when you believe it? And who would you be without that thought? And it's completely reprograms, right?
100%. But I've got another little tool, like, which is like,
Awesome.
is what you're seeing, is that real?
Yeah.
And then is what you're feeling, is that constructive or destructive?
Yeah, that's a
Is
good
what
one.
you're thinking, is that fixed or is it flexible? And then, are your actions or what you're doing, are they working or not working? And bam.
Yeah. Most people don't stop to ask that, do they?
No.
Yeah, I think the is it real? That question is a very interesting one, right? Because on a quantum level, none of it's real, right?
Correct.
Like on a scientific quantum level, like the experience that you are having is completely and utterly, absolutely only real to you, because it is 100% made of your perception. Because at the end of the day, we're all just atoms and neurons and shit floating around, and there's really no differentiation between me and a table, right? So everything then is just made up by the perception of your mind. So that actually means that none of it is real, but it also simultaneously means that it can be whatever you decide.
100%. And that then once again shows the power of having a vision or a goal. You decide it, you can create it.
So I'm interested from because you've got a PhD in neuroscience. Yeah. Right. Cool. And you did 10 years of psychology
and neuroscience together. Yes.
And so, So from a scientific perspective, like, what's your view on manifestation then, right? Because I know it gets a bit of a kind of like a woo-woo hippies, burning some sage and stuff like that. But like from a scientific perspective, if your thoughts shape your reality, then what's your view on that?
100%. So people see manifestation as literally that woo-woo, but if your thoughts shape your reality, what does that actually mean for how you start to interact with the world, how you interact with people, how you see yourself? So if you start to get yourself or your head into gear as to going, well, actually, my reality is really the manifestation of my thoughts, and you start to talk to people differently, interact with people differently, have different relationships, interact with the world very differently, that then sets basically a domino effect moving forward. But you have to actually, what I call know yourself, and you have to have that deep searching within yourself to know who you are, what you want, and then to be not scared of it. Because a lot of people are actually scared of their true self as well, because we have so much conditioning in society around who we should be, what we should want, and how. And it literally is those pre-programmed narratives in our mind, like a record player, that if we can break those apart, we can actually do anything.
How do you get over that fear? Because that's a big one. That is a big one for people. Because one thing to take off the mask, right? It's another thing to not get scared and put the mask back on.
Absolutely. And that's why you hire someone like me, a coach, to help you get over. But it's about not being afraid and actually standing in, your own self as your own voice, and plucking up the confidence and the courage to actually go, well, this is me now.
So I'm interested. I love that. I'm interested how some of these kind of some of this thinking, some of these brain hacks, some of these, this perception has shaped specifically your property journey.
Absolutely. So, as it's a well-run record on this program, everyone starts out with who is interested in property starts out with, let's get the 10 properties.
Yeah. 10 properties in 10 years and 100 grand passive income.
Exactly. Yep. Being done.
Yeah.
And so one of the things is when I was in my early 20s, I was very much what you would call a saver. I just saved. I didn't spend anything. And one of my exes at the time said, you'll never get into property because you can't handle the mortgage, or the what would be seen as mortgage. And I sat there and I went, and you have to be open to these messages that come your way from people and or the environment. And I sat there and I went, I'm going to unpick that. And so I started to unpick that and started to research it more. And I went, why am I like that? And once again, those formative years, 0 to 7, form so much of how we see and how we view our life. And the more I started to unpick that and go, is that real? Is that true? I went, hang on a second. This is a wealth vehicle. This can be a vehicle to wealth. And actually, what does that look like? And I always said I'd retire by 40. I did it. Yeah. I trotted into my previous workplace at, early 30s and said, I won't be around for too long because I'll be retired by 40. Nice. Now, I'd forgotten that I'd said that at that time. But when I said to everyone, all right, I'm sailing off into the sunset, they said, yeah, we already know that. Because they remembered that bold, audacious statement the 5 to 6 years beforehand. And so really, when you think about your mindset and how to sort of unpick some of that from a property journey as such, it's about having the belief that that's the right vehicle for you, if it is. And then going, well, I can actually do it. And as you said, something like 70% only ever purchase one property. Yeah. Have they had the right mindset? Do they know what they're doing? Have they actually gone about it the right way in terms of doing that or not? Yeah. Or have they just followed the crowd, the mum and dad crowd?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's actually, that's typically what happens, right? 71% get stuck at one property and 19% make it to two, but you need to get to 5+ in order to be able to get to where you want to get to, and where most people want to get to be able to tick that box, right? So no, that's really insightful and really, really valuable. What do you want to be remembered for?
A person who has not necessarily lived the norm, and a person who's lived their best life defined by their own terms. And really, if you think about it, at your funeral, I want to have people who go, holy crap, she changed my life.
Awesome. I love that. Live a life by design and live a life differently. That's awesome. Sweet. Okay. So imagine it's your last, this is our final question. It's our final question, right? So imagine it's your last day on earth, many, many, many years from now, and you've accomplished everything that you set out to do, right? You've lived an abnormal life. You've changed the world of the people around you, all of that good stuff. You've done everything. You've got everything. You've ticked all the boxes, right? But for whatever reason, on the day that you pass, everything that you've ever created or ever had or ever achieved is going to be wiped from the face of the earth. No record that you've ever been here. But you get to leave behind 3 simple truths that'll live on forever in your absence. What 3 truths would you leave with the world?
This is one of my favorite questions in the world. So the first one, which really sums up this discussion, is live your best life. And if you think about it, you are the captain of your own ship. Many people are passengers within their own ship, and you're the captain. So it's only up to you to live your best life. The second one is really around encouraging each other, because I think there's not enough of that around us. Yeah. And I think if we encourage each other and in a way to live their best life, the world will be a very different place. And then the third one is to create a better world and leave the world in a better place, because I think we haven't had enough focus around that, creation, but also what a better world actually looks like.
Awesome. I love that. I think that that's awesome, because that is self, others, and the planet. It all captured in there. That's awesome. That's so good. So you mentioned that just a moment ago, you actually mentioned that, you actually coach and help people to kind of get through some of this kind of stuff. If people wanted to reach out and find you or wanted to explore, or get in touch with you, how could they do that? Or is there anywhere they could go?
Easy. So LinkedIn, career transition, or look up Dr. Simone Boer. Facebook, you can look me up, as well as you can just send me an email to info@afreshapproach.com.au.
Love it. Awesome. Well, Dr. Simone, it has been awesome having you on the show. I reckon we could probably do it again and just purely dig into some of this kind of more metaphysical, neuroscientific mindset stuff. I absolutely love it. It's a great space to play in. And I've really enjoyed hearing about your property journey, and specifically like how you're shifting your approach to achieve what you want. But beneath it all is about but making sure that you're telling the right stories to yourself. So it's been so good to have you on the show. I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Fabulous. Thank you, Goose. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Awesome. I'll speak to you soon.
Great.